Several years ago, I bought a used car on Craigslist. I've been driving a pretty old car for a while that I loved. Unfortunately, though, it broke down, and the repairs would cost more than the car was worth, so I decided to get a new car. I went on Craigslist because I feel like the best deals are there. I didn't need anything brand new, but was looking for something a lot newer than my old car, something that would be a little more reliable. I remember when I first started looking, I saw a newer listing that seemed almost too good to be true. I looked it over, and there wasn't a ton of information in the post, but it said that the car ran well and the miles were relatively low, so I contacted the owner immediately. I knew that the car would probably sell fast, and the listing had just been made about 30 minutes prior. The seller got back to me quickly, saying that I could see the car that same day if I wanted, and I agreed. Then I went out and met them in the back of a Target parking lot. I looked at the car, which appeared just like the ad. The seller was a guy who said his name was Jim. He was about average height, had dark brown hair, and was wearing sunglasses and a hat. I went for a short test drive with him down the nearby highway. The car seemed to run fine, and the miles checked out to what the ad said. I didn't really know why the price was so low, but I couldn't find anything wrong with the car, so I bought it from him right then and there. It was crazy that I bought a car so fast. That was literally the first day that I was looking for one. So after I had got the car, I drove it back to my house. I lived alone in an average-sized house. The next day, I decided to go out and clean my new car. With it being used, I figured that it would be a good idea to do a deep cleaning and vacuum it. I first cleaned out the back area and then was doing the front. When I was cleaning the front passenger side seat, I was vacuuming it and something weird happened. The seat sort of moved. I was getting like the crevice, and the bottom part, the part that you actually sit on, moved, and I felt around and pulled on it. Then the entire seat lifted up, revealing a secret compartment, and in there was a bunch of cash. I couldn't believe my eyes. I really didn't know what was going on. I took the money and then went inside my house. There was a bunch of $20 bills as well as some 50s and 100s. I counted it all out and it added up to a little over 10,000. I called my friend and he came over to see it. We talked about what to do and ultimately decided to give it back to the previous owner of the car. We didn't know if he even knew about the money, or maybe it belonged to whoever owned the car before him. I would think that if somebody knew they left over $10,000 cash in a car, they would remember to take it out before selling it. That same night, I went out to my car and examined it closer. Unbelievably, I found 4 more secret compartments beneath the other seats, and one in the center console. It was like the whole car was customized. However, none of the other compartments had any money in them, and they were all empty. Still, it didn't feel right to keep this money. I was just sitting there debating between calling the police and calling the previous owner, and ultimately, I decided to tell the owner. But it was nighttime, so I was going to wait until the next day. But that same night, something weird happened. I was in my bedroom at probably 11 o'clock. I wasn't trying to sleep yet, but I would be going to sleep very soon. That's when I heard a noise coming from outside. I couldn't tell what it was, but it seemed like someone was on my property, so I left the bedroom and headed out to the living room that had a window to the front. I carefully looked outside and saw that there were 2 guys standing in my driveway. I couldn't tell a good description of them because it was really dark out there. I just saw that they were walking around my new car that I had just bought. It looked like they were trying to open one of the doors. Then I watched one of the men suddenly smash the front passenger side window. I realized then that it was probably the guy who had sold the car to me. Who the other guy was, I didn't know. They broke into my car and I watched them go inside. I would have just given him the money back if he asked me. He didn't need to break in. I called the police at this point because clearly this was wrong. The men were inside my car for the next few minutes as I sat on the ground in my living room waiting for the police. Then I saw them leave my car and start to walk into my front yard. When I saw this, I started to panic because they were going towards my house. I didn't know what to do, so I went over to the light switch and turned it on. When I did this, I couldn't see outside very well anymore, but the men appeared to move away and go to the left. I went over to the window and looked out. That's when I saw them leaving and walking away down the street. I was glad to see them gone, but the police still weren't there. I waited around for about 2 or 3 more minutes until I finally saw police cars pulling up. I went outside and met them and let them know what had happened. My car window was smashed, but I didn't have anything in the car at all, so nothing was stolen. I then showed the police the money and gave it to them. After answering a few more questions, the police left and I was able to go to sleep. Now, the next day was very normal. I didn't get any information from the police yet, but that night, something happened. I was actually sleeping this time, but awoken at about midnight. Instantly, I had a feeling that they were back. I got up from my bed and went to the doorway. What I heard was a strange sound at my back window on the other side of the house. I didn't hesitate and I called the police. Then I locked myself in my bedroom and went inside the closet. I didn't want to hear anything. Obviously, I couldn't try to stop the guys from breaking in if that's what they were going to do. Inside of the closet, I didn't really hear anything. It remained mostly quiet until soon the police got there. They were much faster this time than the previous night. When I finally got out of my hiding place, I saw that the police had caught the 2 men. It was the same guys from the previous night. They had just broken part of one of my back windows to the house. Luckily, they didn't make it inside yet. I found out that the guys were the previous owner of the car and had got the money illegally. I'm not sure if they robbed a bank or what. I didn't find that out, but that's why they were selling the car so cheap to get rid of it, and also why the money was in it. But I guess they must have forgot to empty that compartment. It was a crazy story, but I'm glad that everything turned out okay. I used to work at an auto parts store. I love cars, so it was a good job for me. But one time, something really crazy happened. I was working like any other time. It was the afternoon, and I was the only one in the store, working by myself. I was working a closing shift, and normally I would have a coworker with me, but I believe someone called in that day. It was quiet though, and I could handle it just fine. The store was a Checker Auto Parts, so it really wasn't that big. As I was working by myself, no customers were in the store. I was just behind the counter when the door opened and a man walked in. He was skinny with long blonde hair, and I remember that he walked up sort of to the front of the counter. Then he just kind of stood there. I said hi to him and asked if he needed help with anything. The guy just said no back to me. I was just trying to be nice and friendly. Then I asked him if he had a car. I was half joking because I figured that he did to be in here, but he said no. The guy then said that he didn't really know why he was here. I found this pretty strange and didn't know what to immediately say back to him, but then the guy just sort of walked away down one of the aisles. I remember that right after that though, another customer walked into the store. It was a guy who needed me to help him with his car battery, so I assisted him in that. Once I was done, I forgot about the other guy. I kept working, and things picked up a bit. Several more customers came in, and I helped them. Hours went by, and soon it was time for me to close up. Like I said, I was by myself, so I started by making sure nobody was in the store. I went up and down every single aisle, and the store was not that big, so it didn't take long. No one was in there, and I finished up a couple of things and then went to lock the doors. When I was approaching them though, I heard a noise from behind me. I looked, and out of nowhere saw this guy running in my direction. I realized that it was the same guy from earlier. He must have been hiding somewhere inside the store. It was really shocking, but the way he was aggressively running at me told me that I needed to get away. I opened up the doors and ran outside of the shop. I went out into the now dark parking lot, and surprisingly the guy followed me out. He kept chasing after me, and I ran all the way to my car and quickly got inside of it. The man ran to my car, and then got there just after I locked the doors. He tried opening it, and I had no clue as to what he wanted from me. Then he started banging on the window for a few moments. I put the car into reverse and was about to back out and drive away, but before I could, the guy just ran off in another direction. I stopped and watched him running out of the parking lot and behind the building. Then I put my car back into park and decided to go back inside the store. It was my responsibility, and I had never actually locked the doors yet. So I got out of my car and quickly went back inside. Then I locked the doors and called the police. I waited for them to arrive, and in the meantime, I witnessed a man running by. He went back into the parking lot, and I thought that he might try to enter the store, but instead, he ran out of the parking lot in another direction. The cops got there just minutes later. I spoke with them for a while, telling them of what had happened. They said they would look around for the guy, and then I left and went home. I never heard anything more about it. I'm not sure if they caught the guy or what, but the rest of the time that I worked there, I never saw him again. This happened when I was driving home from work late one night. I had just gotten off of work and was tired. It was probably almost midnight or something like that. I had made it most of the way back in my old beat-up car. It was a green 1997 Chevy Cavalier and barely running. As I made it about 75% of the way home, I was driving through a very quiet area. There were no other cars on the street, and mostly just woods on both sides. Suddenly, my car just started dying. I didn't know what to do and pulled over to the side of the road. I tried starting it again, but nothing happened at all. So my next choice was to take out my phone and call for my roadside assistance. Unfortunately, when I did this, my phone had no signal. It was very frustrating, and I wasn't really sure what to do. I sat there for a few minutes thinking of my options. I didn't know enough about cars to try to solve the problem myself, and I couldn't get a hold of anybody. It seemed like I may have to walk to try to find a gas station or something, but I really didn't know if there were any close by. As I was sitting in my car brainstorming a solution, I saw headlights appear on the road behind me. This was the first other car I had seen in a long time. I thought about getting out and flagging them down for a second, but I thought better of it. You don't know who could be driving on the street, especially this late at night, so I decided to stay put in my car. But when the vehicle approached, I saw it slowing down and then pull over behind me. I got nervous when I saw this. Sure, it could be a good citizen trying to help, but it could also be somebody that was up to no good. With it being so late and dark out, I couldn't help but feel a little bit scared. After the car stopped, about at least 50 feet behind me, the lights shut off. It appeared to be a smaller kind of pickup truck. I watched in my mirror, and then after a few seconds, the driver's door opened up. I saw a man step out, but immediately lean into his car and stick his head in there. It was like he was grabbing something. Then he emerged, and I saw that he had just put a clown mask on his head. That's what he was doing. It really gave me the creeps. I wasn't sure why he had done this, but I didn't think that it was to be funny. Then he started walking over to me. He was moving at a pretty quick pace too, and I had to make a decision fast. I don't remember what was going through my head. I just know that I opened up my driver's door and left the vehicle. Then I ran. I sprinted as fast as I could, past my car and along the side of the road. When I did, I didn't look back, but I did hear the clown start to run after me. This made me go faster. I kept running along the side of the road, but the road went on for a lot farther. I'm not sure why, but I suddenly took a right and then ran into the woods. I think I just wanted to get away from the clown, and I thought that it would be harder for him to see me. So I was sprinting through the woods for a while longer, and I did hear the clown enter. After a couple of minutes, I slowed down a little. It was at that point that I realized I couldn't hear him running behind me anymore. I continued to slow down and was just walking. Then I realized that he had likely stopped a while back. I took my phone out to see if I now had a signal, and luckily I did. I then dialed 911. I told them that I had been chased through the forest by a clown, and my car was broken down on the side of the road. I'm not sure what they thought when they heard that, but it was the truth. I gave them my location as best as I could. I waited in the middle of the woods for a while, hearing nothing at all. Then I decided to try to walk back to my car. I went through the woods back the way I had came. I walked for several minutes, trying to make my way back to the road. Then, when I was passing by this small clearing area, on the other side something caught my eye. The clown was there, just standing behind another tree. He was mostly obstructed by the tree, but I noticed the whiteness of his mask. It was too late for me to hide, and he then looked over at me. Then I saw him emerge from behind the tree and start to move in my direction. I started sprinting, trying to get back to the road. The clown started to chase after me. It was another chase, and I ran even faster this time. It took me probably a full minute before I reached the road. When I did, I took off running in the direction where my car was parked. I did look back this time and saw the clown emerge from the woods. Then I looked back and kept running. A few seconds later, I saw flashing lights up ahead. The police were here. I kept running until I saw my car and then slowed down to a jog. I felt much better and looked back, but the clown was now gone. He must have run back into the woods. I met with the police, and the clown guy's truck was still parked behind my car. The police said they would stay with me until my roadside service got there, and they were able to call for me because I still had no signal. The clown guy did not return. When my road service came and towed my car, I got a ride back home, and the clown's truck was still there when I left, but he was nowhere in sight. I'm not sure if he just kept hiding in the woods the whole time or what. The next time I drove by there, the truck was gone. I don't know what that clown was planning to do that night. I'm really glad that I ran from him though. Something really weird happened to me last summer. I live alone in a house that's somewhat out in the country. My house is on a busier road, but I have a large yard, so it doesn't bother me that much, because my house is a ways from the road and I have a longer driveway. My property is 7 acres in total. Next to my driveway, I have my mailbox, and then some trees are planted alongside the road for privacy. There is, however, a good amount of grass. So one morning, I got up and went outside and noticed something strange. Someone had parked their car in my front yard. I walked out to examine it and saw that it was a car for sale. They had parked their car at the end of my yard about 50 feet from the driveway. It was facing the road so anybody driving by would see it. The car was what looked like a red 2002 Dodge Neon. It was facing the road with a big sign that said, "For sale." There was then a price and a phone number to call. So apparently somebody thought that it was okay to just park their car in my yard to try to sell it. This rubbed me the wrong way. I took out my phone and dialed the number on the sign. A man picked up, and I asked him if he was the one selling the Neon. He said that he was, and I told him that he parked it in my front yard. Then I told him that I didn't want him parking there, and asked him to move it. He claimed that his friend told him that he knew me and it was all right. When I asked him the friend's name, he said John Newman. Well, I didn't know anybody named John Newman, and I figured that this guy was just making it up on the spot. I told him to just move the car as soon as possible. He said that he would, and then he hung up on me. I didn't know who this guy was or why he parked his car there. For the rest of the day, he did not come by and move it at all. I even checked outside before I went to bed that night. He still hadn't moved it yet. I guessed that I would call him the next day and ask him again. Well, the next morning, I got up and went outside at about 7 a.m. The car was gone. I guess he had moved it overnight, which was kind of weird, but good, I guess. Then I noticed something else. My mailbox was broken. The guy must have ran over my mailbox. It was completely split in half and lying on the ground. I bet he did it out of spite, too. I called him again. When he answered, I told him that he ran over my mailbox. Of course, he denied it. I chewed him out a little bit, and I said that he better come back and fix it, or else buy me a new mailbox, or I was going to call the police. He didn't say anything and just hung up on me. After that, I thought about what I should do, but I ended up just deciding to get a new mailbox myself. In my mind, it wasn't worth calling the cops. I was really mad, but at least he took his car. My mailbox was kind of cheap anyways. I figured that was that, but it wasn't. That same night, I was at home by myself in the kitchen. It was probably 9 or 10 p.m. I heard a noise coming from out front, and I went over to look. Even though I live off a busier street, it's usually quiet at night, and I seldom hear things on my property. So I went to a front window to look, and I saw this guy poking around near my car in the driveway. I went to the front door and opened it up. I had a feeling that this was the same guy, returning to do who knows what. When I opened up the door, I called out to the guy, asking him what he was doing. He was wearing dark clothing with a hood covering most of his face. Then he turned to me and faced me for a moment. He didn't say anything though. Then he started walking in my direction. I didn't know what he was capable of, so I closed my door and locked it. He walked all the way up and tried opening the door. Then I watched him run off into the night. He went all the way down my driveway and seemingly back out to the street. I watched out the window for a while, but didn't see him again. Then I went outside and looked around, but still didn't see him. He finally left for good. After that night, nothing more happened. I'm not really sure what he was doing there, but I'm glad that he left when he did. This happened last spring. I was shopping at Walmart one night. I only went there to get a couple of things in the home improvement section. The store was pretty quiet overall, but things were especially quiet in this area. I remember that as I was looking at a couple of products on the shelves, I heard somebody walking nearby. I looked up and saw a man entering the aisle that I was in. At first, I thought nothing of it, but he soon approached. Then he said hi to me and asked me if I could help him out for a second. When I asked what it was, he asked me if I knew much about cars, because he didn't. I told him that I knew a little bit and asked what he needed help with. The man just said that he had a quick question about a product. I said okay, and then followed him a few aisles over to the automotive section. There were a few aisles that had car parts and products in them. He walked up to like a car wash and wax kit and asked me what it was. I told him what it was, and I was confused why he would ask me that because it literally said on it. Then he got a tire inflator and asked me what that was. I explained to him what that product was as well. The man then asked me about probably 5 more things. I was wondering what he was doing. It seemed like he just wanted to ask me what every single product in the aisle was. After like 5 minutes, I told the guy that I had to be going now, and I started to walk away. He literally stopped me and picked up a random object off the shelf and asked me what that one was too. I stopped mid-stride, turned to him and said, "That's a Mobil 1 oil filter." Then I continued with my walk away from the guy. I got back to the aisle where I had been before, and now quickly grabbed the products that I had been meaning to get and started walking away. I just knew that the guy was going to try to follow me, so I started walking quickly towards the front of the store to check out. I made it to the front without seeing him, but when I was at the self-checkout scanning my items, I saw him again. He was standing a ways away, just watching me. I didn't know what this guy's deal was, but it was kind of creepy. After paying, I took my stuff and started walking for the exit. When I left the store and was about 20 feet outside, I heard someone walking behind me. I turned around and saw that it was the same guy. I was annoyed, and I stopped to confront him. I said, "Why are you following me around, man?" He didn't answer me, and just walked directly to his left and started walking along the side of the store. He just completely ignored what I had to say, but at least he seemed to be going in another direction now, and I could leave. So I turned and continued heading for my car. I had parked kind of towards the back, near a few other cars. When I got inside, I started my engine, but then saw somebody standing behind me. It was the same guy. Now, I had a car parked in front of me, a car corral to my left, and another car to my right, so I was boxed in. I needed him to move. He got closer and started sort of looking in my rear window. It was very strange. I rolled down my window and asked him to move. The guy didn't answer me, and then got on top of the rear portion of my car. He was then standing on top of my car. I told him to get down, but he didn't. He just kept standing there. I really didn't know what to do. This went on for like 2 or 3 minutes. Then he jumped down and sprinted away. I left right then and there. After that, I did not return to that Walmart for a while. That guy still creeps me out when I think about it. I'm a 25-year-old female, and I work at an auto parts store. I've worked at this store for about 3 years now, and I'm only part-time and work a couple of nights per week. Normally, all of the customers are great. I've only had one bad experience. It was about a year ago. I was working one night and working until close, which was 9 p.m. My coworker Dave was working with me, and we were the only ones in the store. Generally, later at night, things were pretty quiet. It was about 8:30 p.m. when I heard the doors open. Soon after, a man walked up and approached me at the front counter of the store. Dave was in the back at the time. The man told me that he thought something was wrong with his car and asked if I could test it for him. We were able to do that, and it was free, so I got the device from behind the counter and followed the man outside the store. When I first got outside, I saw his car because it was the only one in the parking lot other than mine and Dave's. He had parked it in the back, and it looked kind of like a beater. It appeared to be a 2001 Dodge Caravan, except the front passenger side door was a replacement, and it was gray, while the rest of the van was painted red. The hood of the van was also black. The man was fairly short, thin, and wore a red sweatshirt. As I approached the driver's door, the man stopped me and said that the driver's door was broken and you had to enter through the passenger side. I then walked back around and he opened up the door. I got inside and leaned over. I then asked the man for the key to start the engine. Instead of handing me the key though, the man then slammed the door shut behind me. Then he raced around to the front driver's door and opened it up. He got inside the car and I asked him what on earth he was doing. Then the man started the engine and began driving away immediately. He recklessly sped out onto the street. I went to open my door, but there was no door handle from the inside. I asked the man to let me out, but he did not respond. I asked him over and over where we were going and what he was doing. The only thing he ever said was to stay back. I considered trying to overpower him, but he was driving pretty fast and I had no idea what he would do. I was afraid that we would crash. The guy seemed really unpredictable. I glanced back as we were driving and saw that the sliding door actually had a handle on it from the inside. There were also no rear seats in the van at all. The only two seats were the two that we were in. There was some random junk scattered around the back, and it was really cluttered. About a minute later, we slowed down for a red light. As soon as we came to a stop, I quickly moved to the back area of the van. Then, I pulled up the lock and tried the door handle. As I did this, the man started to yell at me, but when I tried the handle, it actually opened. The van then started to move, and I jumped out of it right as it pulled away. I fell to the ground in the middle of the road in front of an intersection. We had been the only vehicle there. The van then slammed on its brakes about 10 feet ahead. I saw the driver's door open and the man emerging. I ran backwards down the road as quickly as I could, and when I did, I noticed headlights and a car was coming down the road. That's when the man stopped his pursuit and headed back to the van. I walked along the side of the road until I had finally made it back to the auto parts store. It took me probably 15 to 20 minutes. I had left my phone in the store. When I made it back, it was just before close. Dave had wondered where I had gone. I told him everything, and he called the police, who came out and asked me a bunch of questions. They were able to locate the man who was driving in the van, which happened to be a stolen vehicle. This happened last spring. It was March, and my car needed a new battery. I went to Advance Auto Parts to look for a new one. I really don't know that much about cars, just the basics. When I first got inside the store, I remember smelling the smell of rubber tires. I made my way to the area where the batteries were. I started looking at them and researching ones on my phone as well. When I was doing this, I remember that some guy approached me and asked me if I was having battery problems with my car. At first, I thought he worked there, but when I looked up and saw him, I noticed that he didn't. It was just some guy wearing a blue coat and a blue baseball cap. I told him yes, and I was just trying to find a good battery. The guy then started to tell me that he was a mechanic and could work on my car for really cheap if I wanted. This didn't interest me. I just needed a new battery, and I figured he was just trying to get more business and could tell that I didn't know a whole lot about cars. I just kind of said cool, but no thanks. I decided to check a few more auto parts stores for their battery prices. I went to O'Reilly, Napa, and CarQuest. When I was at CarQuest, I was sure that I saw the same guy. However, I left almost as soon as I came in after noticing him. The next day, I decided to go with a battery from Advance Auto Parts after all. I had compared all the prices and quality and noticed that they had the best ones. I walked into the store and went straight for the battery that I wanted. As I was picking it up, I saw the guy again. He was at the far end of the aisle, and I could tell out of the corner of my eye that he was starting to walk towards me. I did not look in his direction, but just walked to the counter. He didn't follow me up to the counter, and I was able to buy the battery. Then, I left the store, got into my car, and drove away. Right as I was pulling out of the parking lot, though, I noticed a car pulling out right behind me. I glanced in my mirror and was sure that the same guy was driving the car behind me, but he now had sunglasses on. As I drove the 10 minutes back to my house, he followed me the entire ways. I drove all the way to my street, but then realized that I shouldn't let him know where I lived. I drove past my house and then turned onto another street. I wasn't sure what to do, so I just pulled over to the side of the road right there. What I was hoping was that the guy would drive past, but he pulled over behind me. I wasn't going to get out of my car and confront him, but if he was going to get out, I would consider talking to him. I wanted to know what exactly he wanted, and if he started to threaten me, I could just drive away. He didn't get out though. We both sat there in our cars on the side of the road for a good 10 minutes. Finally, he started driving and pulled away. After he passed me, I made a U-turn and drove back to my house. I never saw the guy again. I still wonder a lot of things about what happened there, though. My name is Michael. I used to work at Napa Auto Parts about 5 years ago. I really enjoyed working there. I've always loved cars, and the store I worked at was only about a mile away from my home. Working there was usually not too busy either. I never recall a time where there were more than 10 customers inside at once. One night, I was working with James, my coworker, and everything was going pretty typical. I'd been working there for a while at that time, and was often responsible for closing up. I remember that things were mostly quiet on that night, and after it was time to close, James left to go home. After he had left, I'd stayed back to finish up sweeping, and then went into the back room. That's when I heard a noise back there. There was a decent amount of space in the back. We stored lots of parts back there, and there were shelves all over the place. The noise was a little ways away, not too far. I walked closer and really had no idea what it could be. Then I reached the source of the noise. It was coming from behind a box that was in a corner. I moved the box, which revealed a man crouched down. He had long, stringy hair and was holding some type of auto part in his hands. I was too surprised to realize exactly what part it was. The man pulled the box back, blocking him from my sight again. I took a step back and said, "What are you doing back there?" I kept staring at the box. There was about a 5-second delay, and then the box suddenly was pushed back. A man emerged, holding that same auto part in his hand as if it were a weapon. Obviously, I had nothing to defend myself with. My best move was to get the heck out of there. I backed up as the man began sprinting towards me. I made it back into the store, and then closed the door to the back to try to stop him. I knew that I had to call the police, and I dialed. The man did not enter the store area, but remained in the back. I kept an eye out on the door to the back, but I moved as far away from it as I could. When the police arrived, the man was gone. He must have left out an exit door that we had in the back. I don't believe he was ever found either. The good thing was that he didn't steal anything or do any damage. I really don't know how he got back there, though. I guess he just snuck back there when James or I wasn't looking. Several years ago, as I was driving home from work one day, the rear taillight went out on my car. I drove a smaller SUV and still have it to this day, although I'm not much of a car guy. Luckily, I didn't get pulled over, and when I got home, I took out the taillight to see that the bulb was burned out. I didn't have a spare one, so the next morning, which happened to be a Saturday, I drove to a nearby auto parts store to get a new one. The store was quiet, and when I walked in, there was a man working behind the counter who waved to me and said hello. I said hi to the man and wandered around a little bit trying to find out where the bulbs were. The man must have seen how I didn't really know where they were, and he asked me what it was I was looking for. After I told him my situation, he said he would be happy to help me, and he led me to an aisle which had tons of different light bulbs for cars. He told me the options that I had to choose from. After he showed me a few of them, he then went back to the other end of the store behind the counter. I looked around for several minutes, comparing a few types of which ones I thought I would get for my car. Finally decided on one, Then I started to walk out of the aisle. But when I did, I noticed the man was no longer behind the counter. I was looking towards the front of the store, realizing this, when suddenly I felt something hit me from behind. It was a small package of a random car part. I looked behind me to the direction that it had been tossed from. I saw nothing at first, but then from the far end of the aisle that I was in, I saw the same man who had been working there and I had spoken to. He was peeking out from behind the other side. He had a creepy grin on his face and then opened his mouth widely. His smile then suddenly disappeared and he sprinted away. I was so confused. I thought it was a joke at first, but he was acting so different than he had been before. He had been friendly and helping me out, and now he seemed almost insane. I then heard a loud noise followed by laughter coming from the next aisle over. The man then shouted at me that he would leave the store if he was me. I asked the man what was going on, but he didn't answer me. I no longer thought he was joking, and I was legitimately freaked out. I decided that it would be best if I just left. That guy seemed to be the only person who was working there at the time, and I was the only one shopping. I then heard a loud crashing sound coming from the aisle next to me again, and I heard the man start to run. I left the light bulbs there for my car and walked faster to the front end of the store. When I got there, I looked behind me to see the man sprinting towards me, and I quickly left and got into my car. He didn't follow me outside. I drove to another auto parts store and got the part for my car there. I never went back to that store and always wondered what the man was doing. This happened roughly 5 years ago when I took my car to be repaired at a mechanic's shop nearby my house. My car had been having problems starting for a while, and it was sort of a beater, but I loved it because I had had it since my senior year of high school. I took it to the shop and left it overnight. The next morning, my friend dropped me off at the shop and I picked up my car. I didn't really know much about cars, but I talked with the mechanic for a couple of minutes and pretended like I did. He explained to me what was wrong with my car and what they did to fix it. I was just happy that it was working again, and it didn't cost me a fortune. I drove back, and the car was running just fine until literally the next day. As I was driving down the road at night, suddenly the radio in the car turned on out of nowhere. Now, this had never happened before, and I was confused, but I brushed it off as it didn't seem all too strange. A couple of days later, though, as I was driving once again, out of nowhere the windshield wipers on the car turned on. Now, I know I hadn't bumped them on accident like I sometimes would. Things were just seeming strange in the car overall. I thought maybe some sort of electrical connection to the car had been messed up when it was worked on or something. I didn't really want to take the car back though, and hoped that the problem would just go away on its own. Everything was back to normal for the most part after that though, for about a week. But then, as I was driving the car once again at night, the radio suddenly turned on. This time, it started changing the stations on its own. After that, all of the electronics in the car were going haywire for a good 15 seconds, and then finally stopped. I then heard on the radio a voice come over which sounded like it was a recording of somebody on the phone. The voice started to seemingly speak gibberish, but in a very deep voice. I was completely creeped out of my mind. This continued the entire 5 minutes or so until I got home. I got out of the car and called my friend. We talked for a while, and he tried to convince me that the people at the mechanic shop somehow messed up my car. I really didn't want to drive my car anymore, though. I ended up putting it up for sale after that, and sold it a short time later. I don't know what the deal was, but I'm glad I have another car now. Two years ago, I had a problem with the tires of my car. My car was fairly new and reliable, but over time the tires started to get a ton of wear on them, and I found out that I needed them replaced. One day when I was out, I happened to be shopping at the Walmart near my house. I was in sort of the corner of the store, and I noticed that they had an auto center there. The auto center was at the very far back corner, and I had never really noticed it before, but I decided to give it a look and see how much their tires were and what kinds they had. As I walked into the area, I could see that nobody else was really over there. I walked over to the desk that they had to see if anybody was working there that I could talk to. There was nobody there though, and when I looked around the auto center, it didn't really look like it was used much anymore and seemed pretty outdated. After a minute or so, I decided to just look at the tire information that they did have and then just leave. The next day, however, as I got home from work and got my mail, I saw that in my mail there was a postcard from the Walmart Auto Center. It was basically just an advertisement to go, and I found it a funny coincidence how I had just been there the day before. But the next day, I got the same thing in the mail once again. It was the exact same postcard, and now it went from a funny coincidence to a bit strange. I took it inside and threw it away. The very next day, I got one again, and the day after that, and the day after that. I was getting the same exact flyer from the Walmart Auto Center every single day as part of my mail. I decided that this was fishy enough, so I drove back to the same Walmart to try to see what was going on. I took a handful of the flyers that I received and went to the same auto department that I had been to before. This time, there was actually someone working there. A man was behind the counter, and I showed him the flyers and told him my situation. He looked at them and said that he didn't know why I kept getting them, and basically didn't have an explanation for me. However, he pointed out to me that none of the postcards had actually been addressed to me, and showed me a large stack of them that they had near the counter. When I saw this, it made me realize that whoever was giving me these postcards was not actually sending them to me, but physically putting them in my mailbox every day. I went back home after that, and decided I would try to keep a lookout of my mailbox to see who was doing this. The first 2 days, I once again got more flyers, but failed to see who did it. But the next morning, I was up early at about 6 a.m. It was before the sun had risen, and I just happened to be looking out of my window. When I did, I saw a man slowly walking down the side of the street. My eyes locked onto him when I noticed him walking closer to my mailbox. Then, I saw him reach into the pocket of his jacket and place something in my mailbox. I had finally seen who did it, but right after he did, I noticed him look to my window and then look directly at me. I didn't know what to do when I saw this, but before I could think of anything, the man started sprinting up my yard and towards my house. He ran all the way to the front door and tried to open it. Luckily, it was locked, and I watched him run away. I thought he was leaving, but a couple of moments later, I heard the sound of the back door to my house trying to be opened. That's when I decided to call the police. Clearly, somebody was trying to break into my house. When I had called 911, I told them what was going on and started to walk into my bedroom. But as I was on my way there, and literally right after I hung up the phone, I heard the sound of glass breaking. That's when I decided to run into my bathroom instead and lock the door. I didn't hear any noises though after the breaking of glass. I was thinking maybe the man never did enter my house and had just left. I waited and waited in my bathroom for what felt like forever, not hearing anything and waiting for the police to arrive. I couldn't take it anymore, and I finally decided to leave the bathroom and walk out. But as soon as I did, I saw the man standing inside my house about 10 feet away from me, smiling. It was the creepiest thing I had ever seen. The man was wearing a jacket with the hood up, and I couldn't really tell much details of his face, other than he looked like a pretty average guy. I ran back inside the bathroom and locked the door quickly. Thankfully, at around the same time, I started to hear the sirens. The man never did try to enter the bathroom, and the police showed up only to find the man completely gone. They looked around my property and neighborhood, but never found him. After that, I never got anything else strange in the mail, and I never saw the man again, but sometimes I worry he will return. I also wonder what he was doing, if he had seen me at the Walmart and decided to randomly stalk me or what, but I'm glad I've never seen him again. This story took place 2 summers ago. I'm a female for reference and was 20 years old and in college at the time. During summers, I would live at home with my parents, and during the school year, I would live at my college, which was about 3 hours away. Over the course of the school year, I never really did any maintenance to my car, and once summertime came, it wasn't running very well. It was sort of an old car that I had saved up to buy during high school, so it was never really that great of a car to begin with. But when I got back from college and my dad looked at my car, he told me I needed to take it to the mechanic to get a few things fixed. He told me he had an old friend who was a mechanic, and he would work on the cars for super cheap, so we decided to take my car there. My dad hadn't talked to the guy for several years, but was hoping he would still fix the car for cheap. We drove over to him, and when we got to his shop, He said he would fix the car by the next few days and would only charge $200 for it. Now $200 is still a lot of money, but apparently it would cost about $500 to $600 at a normal mechanic's shop. The guy was sort of old, and I guess he was semi-retired, which allowed him to sort of work on cars whenever he felt like it. He was a really friendly guy, and talked to us for quite a while, asking me lots of questions about myself, and talking to my dad as well before we went back home. A couple of days later, my dad got a call from the guy saying that the car was done. The next morning, my dad dropped me off at the guy's shop on his way to work. I paid him and then got my keys. Everything was fine until the man started asking me a lot more questions about myself. He seemed like he really wanted to talk to me, and at first I thought he was just a really friendly guy who liked to talk a lot, but the questions he was asking me were starting to make me uncomfortable. He was asking me things like what I was going to do that day, where I was going, if I had a boyfriend, and if I found him to be a good-looking guy. It was just seeming creepier and creepier, and eventually I told the guy I really had to get home. He then said he should follow me home, because a part that he installed on the car was really difficult, and he wanted to make sure it didn't break. Now, obviously I saw right through this lie, because it just really didn't make any sense, and it seemed like just an excuse for him to follow me home. I told him no, it would be fine, but he insisted. I didn't know what else to do, so I just said fine, and then got in my car and started to drive home. However, when I was about halfway home, I got an idea. I decided to drive to my friend Rachel's house instead, because I knew I could park in her driveway, and even go to her house and it wouldn't be weird. I also wouldn't be alone there like I would at my house with both of my parents at work. I made the decision to go there because I really didn't want this creepy guy to know where I lived. I arrived at Rachel's house and then parked. I saw the man in his truck behind me the whole time, and after I got out of the car, he waved at me and drove away. I was very happy to see him leave, and I then texted Rachel, who came out and talked to me for a while. I then felt bad, realizing the man could potentially return to Rachel's house later on if he wanted. I told her to call me if she saw him again, and then I went home. Once I was there, I called my dad and told him how the guy was being really creepy. My dad became furious and told me he was going to call the guy right away. This made me feel a lot better, and after that, I felt like the situation had been taken care of. My dad told my mom and I later that night that he called the guy, and after my dad accused him of being a creep, the guy hung up on him and blocked his number. Later on that night, as I was in bed watching TV in my room, I noticed a truck driving down the street, and immediately my heart sank when I saw the shape of the truck. It looked just like the old truck that the guy drove. The truck slowed down and stopped on the side of the road in front of our house. Then, I saw the same man get out. I was surprised that he knew where I lived after I drove to my friend's house. I immediately ran out of my room to the living room where my parents were. I told them what was going on, and my dad ran out of the house. We watched from the window as the guy ran back into his truck and just barely made it in and drove away before my dad got to him. We called the police, and luckily we knew who the guy was and where he worked. Unfortunately, though, we couldn't really prove anything against him that he did anything wrong other than trespassing in our yard. However, after that, we never saw him again. When I was 18 years old, I bought my first car. It wasn't all that nice, but I saved up and bought one that ran really well and had no major problems, so I was pretty excited about it. The car did, however, need to get new windshield wipers. The back ones worked fine, but every time I used the front ones, they did nothing. I went to Walmart one night and walked to the auto department to find some. I used the little book they had and found my car make and model, and then picked out the wipers that worked for my car. As I was picking them out, I noticed a man standing about 30 feet away, literally hiding behind a corner, aside from his head popping out staring at me. He was bald with a little hair on the side of his head and had thick glasses. I immediately was creeped out when I saw the way he was looking at me. I looked away fast, and he seemed to do the same. I figured it was just an awkward random moment, and I finished getting my wipers and then started walking back to the front of the store. As I walked back and was almost at the checkouts, I noticed a man was walking behind me by about 20 feet. This was slightly alarming, so instead of checking out and leaving, I decided to do a little test by doing a 180 and walking backwards to the opposite end of the store once again. I didn't see the man as I did this, and when I got to the other end of the store, I thought he was gone. That is until I noticed him walk past me out of an aisle about 2 aisles away. At this point, I knew something was up. The store was not too busy at this hour, but I decided to walk around the outside of the store rather quickly, all the way around to the checkouts, to hopefully lose the man. When I did, I didn't see him at all, and I checked out and left the store. I approached my car at the back of the parking lot and decided to put the new windshield wipers on right then and there because we were expecting rain that night. It took me about 5 minutes to put them on, and as I was finishing up, I saw a car pulling up to the parking space right next to me. I was kind of annoyed by this because there was many spaces closer to the store that were open. It was an old beat-up car that's engine made a loud noise as if there was something wrong with it. I looked and saw that driving the car was the bald man with glasses. He was staring directly at me. Without hesitating, I ran around and jumped into my car and then started it and left. But just as I was afraid of, the car began to follow me. I turned onto the nearest road and then turned again. I turned at just about every opportunity I had to turn, and each time, the man would go with me. This went on for about 10 minutes before he randomly pulled over to the side of the road and stopped. I wasn't going to wonder why, though. I just kept driving and looking over my shoulder until I got home. I never saw the man again. I don't know what his deal was, but the way he looked at me still creeps me out. I used to have an old car that needed a lot of work. I was younger and into fixing things, so I considered my car one of my personal projects. I would go to the local auto shop quite often and buy new parts for it. It was a quiet little shop, and it was never very busy, but the people there were always nice and helpful to me. One thing that I started noticing when I went to the shop is that there was this area in the back where you could go and have service done to your car. It didn't seem like it was really used much at all, and almost every time I went there, I saw a man standing behind the window at the counter in the corner, and he would stare at me as I came in. After the first several times, I waved at him, but he never waved back. He just kind of stared and slightly smiled. I never saw him anywhere else, and I would only ever see him when I was walking in. When I would leave the shop sometimes, I'd look over, but he would never be there. It was something that I didn't really think about other than when I was at the shop, but when I was there it just seemed kind of strange. On probably like the 10th time I went to the store and got something, when I was checking out, I finally asked the guy working who that man was that was always in the window. The man working seemed confused and told me nobody was working in that department at this time. After some more conversation, I described the man to him and how he always looked at me. The guy working then told me it sounded like I was describing him, the original owner of the shop, who had died 10 years earlier. It was crazy to hear this, and after that, I never did see the man again. I have owned a car repair shop for the last 15 years. The scariest thing to ever happen was about 10 years ago. My shop is relatively small, but I do have several employees. One evening, at about 6 p.m., I was working at the front desk doing some paperwork. An older man then walked into the shop. He was wearing a black suit jacket and looked well put together. He came up to me and asked me if I would be able to fix his car. Now, we normally require appointments, but things were not all that busy at this time, so I asked the man what was wrong with his car. He told me he thought something seemed wrong with it, but he didn't know quite what, and that it occasionally broke down. I asked him a few more questions, but he didn't really give me any answers. The man then handed me the keys and told me he would come back the next day to pick up his car. Then he walked out of the shop. It was strange, because he didn't really allow me to say anything. He just gave me the keys and left. I didn't even get a chance to tell the man how long it would take or anything. I decided I would look at his car later that night. So when the rest of our work was done, I sent my 2 mechanics home, and I decided to finish the night by trying to fix the man's car. I got the keys and walked out to where he parked it. The car looked to be about 20 years old, was black, and seemed to be in pretty good shape. I got inside the car, and it was as clean as can be. I started it and drove it into the garage. Almost right after I got into the garage with it, the car just died. I got out and looked around at it. Then I was a little concerned to see that the car had no license plates on it. I opened up the hood, and everything seemed to be fine. Then after I shut the hood, the car started on its own. I was really surprised to see this, so I got the keys and went inside and shut the car off. It was beginning to freak me out a little bit, so I decided not to do any work on it until the man came back the next day and I got more information on it. I locked everything up at the shop and went home for the night. The next morning, I was the first one to show up like always, and I unlocked the place and went inside. When I got to the garage, the car was gone. I was shocked. I expected the man to come back that day, and I didn't know how to explain his car not being there. But the man never did show up. After that, I ended up reporting what happened to the police, but I really don't know if they were ever able to find anything. I never saw or heard from the man or his car again. Unfortunately, I didn't have security cameras at my shop at the time, so I may never know what happened. Sometimes, the whole thing seems like it was just a dream because of how strange it was, but I know it was real. This story was a pretty creepy thing that happened to me about 8 years ago now. It was the late summertime, and my parents got into a minor car accident with their car. Nobody was hurt, and the car accident was not their fault, so they were able to get enough money from the insurance to buy a car that was a little bit newer. Our car was pretty old, almost 20 years old actually, so we were looking to get a car with under 100,000 miles on it. I remember I went with my parents to look at some cars one Saturday, and we went to this really old dealership that was in town. We had drove past it here and there for years, but had never gone to it. When we got there, we saw that there was an older man who worked there, and he came out and introduced himself as the owner. From the very beginning, he just gave me the creeps. I don't know exactly why, but he just did. We told him the kind of car we were looking for, and he showed us a few. Then he invited us inside, and we all sat at a table inside his dealership and talked about the cars. I was only 14 at the time, so I don't remember a whole lot of what was said, but I do remember I felt uncomfortable in his shop with him. It was so old and run down inside, and after about 15 minutes of talking, we all finally left. We ended up not buying a new car from him, and we got a car from a different dealer about a week later. Then I would say about another week after that, the news came on after a baseball game that I was watching on TV. They announced that a man had been caught for a kidnapping and murder that had taken place several months before. Then they showed a picture of the man from the car dealership. I couldn't believe it. To this day, every time I think back to being at his shop with him, I get the chills. I am a 23-year-old female. This story took place last summer. I had just recently gotten a new car. Well, actually it was used, but it was only 8 years old and was much better than the 2003 car I had been driving. The car had no problems, but did need to get its tires rotated. So about a week after I bought it, I took it to a local mechanic. I had never been to the guy before, but his prices seemed pretty low. I drove the car to the shop, which was located on a quiet end of town and not really next to anything else. I went inside and gave the mechanic the keys. I had made the appointment online, and when I got there, he said it would be about 30 minutes or less and told me I could wait in the waiting room while the work was done. I went in and sat down in a chair in the waiting room. There was nobody else at the shop, and it was rather old. The place looked like it hadn't been updated at all since the 1980s. They even had a big box TV that was on, and it played the Weather Channel on it. I sat down and went on my phone for this time. When about 20 minutes had passed, the mechanic came back in and said that my car was done. After that, I drove back home and everything was normal. But about a week later, I was driving home from work one night, and I heard what sounded like a faint buzzing noise. I thought it was a bug in the car at first, so I rolled down a few windows and hoped it would fly out. But the sound kept going, and after I put the windows back up and listened closer, I could hear it wasn't exactly the sound of a bug. I drove the rest of the way home, and then turned my car off and listened. I didn't hear anything for a few seconds, but then I heard it again. I looked around my car and saw something behind the mirror. It was a little black thing that was mounted, and when I examined it, it appeared to be a camera. It was very well hidden, and I hadn't noticed it until looking extremely close. I ended up looking very closely around the rest of my car, and I ended up finding 2 more cameras. I took them inside and later brought them to the police. It turned out the mechanic put them in my car to spy on me. It was extremely creepy, and I never should have took my car to him in the first place.